Laura.
Okay. Welcome everybody. Everyone's getting into our summit room today. Nice to see everybody on time. We're going to start this off once the attendance sort of stabilizes. I hope everyone's having a good day. Happy spring to everybody. And we are going to kick this off now as I see our participants have stabilized. So good morning, everybody. Hello, Northeast Chapter and beyond. I'm Melinda Montgomery. I'm the Northeast Chapter President. Today, we bring to you another value-added service on behalf of the Northeast Chapter. This summit is going to be fantastic. It's one of many of our diversity, equity, inclusion summits. This one is Women in Aviation Revealed. So I'm a woman in aviation. For me, it's always been about just do the work, the talent will rise to the top. I also realized that I've got the benefit. I was recently interviewed by a news channel for Women in Aviation Week. And they said to me, are you the first woman to manage the Trenton Mercer Airport, which is what I do? And I go, yeah, I think I am. But the point is, it never really occurred to me to process that per se, that I'm the first. And you know what that means to me? That I benefit from standing on the shoulders of those who came before me, to the point that it's just sort of natural for me to be in the position that I am. But it wouldn't have been so without the greats. And I'll just list a couple of the NEC chapter greats, right? Elaine Roberts, Barbara Patzner, Jean Olivier. Without them, I might not be in the position I am today. I might not have had access to this position. So I'm very grateful for the hard work and the precedents that they've set, the glass ceilings that they shattered for me and a lot of people like me. So here we are. I'm doing just a short opener. So we're women in aviation. The reality is, despite gender roles expanding, women will bear the gift and the burden of childbearing, child rearing. That comes into play. So I think it's very important. Aviation's a fantastic career, right? I take every opportunity. I hope you take every opportunity to expose our youth to gender and race representation. And because as the summit highlights, you have to see it to be it. So with that being said, I'm going to hand this off to our Northeast Chapter AAAE Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair, Api Appalingam. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Melinda. Wonderful, inspiring words that you have noted. I also stand on the shoulders of a lot of women before me. I am the first woman to hold the position at PHL for Deputy Director of Capital Development and first woman of color. So I know there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that. I'm also proud to be the first, but it's not easy. But I think we're all doing what we can in our role. So again, thank you, Melinda. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first DE&I Virtual Summit for 2022. We have several more planned for the year, so stay tuned and hope you can join us then as well. We had a great last year. We presented our first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award. And over the course of the year, we heard from many of you and many of our supporters of the way you are prioritizing DE&I within your organization, from promoting women to establishing employee resource groups, to hiring a chief diversity officer, and just so much more. I could go on and on, but it just made sense for us in hearing all of these topics and conversations for us to highlight the work and to celebrate those efforts. So we put out a survey last fall and we received a lot of positive response for participating in what we called the Celebrating DE&I video. We gathered all of the video submissions and we created an amazing video. I want to thank Urban Engineers for volunteering their time to edit and compile the video. It's great, and you don't have to take my word for it. We're going to share it for the first time today. So Laura, when you're ready, can you pull up the video and we will launch it.
Immediately following the death of George Floyd and the ensuing local and national civil unrest, PHL established a Racial Equity Advisory Council to drive meaningful change and lasting impact throughout the airport community. The council is addressing the systemic racism that has permeated throughout our industry, our city, and our nation for far too long.
Urban is proud to have a long history of supporting our employees through the self-driven creation of employee resource groups. Beginning with the Urban Women's Professional Network almost 15 years ago, the trend has continued with the formation of other groups reflecting the ever-changing composition of our company. We are excited to see what new groups and initiatives will come in the future.
One of the ways JMT celebrates diversity, equity, and inclusion is through our business resource groups, which are voluntary, employee-led groups that foster a diverse and inclusive workplace.
There are currently 2 active BRGs at JMT. Their focus is on empowering people who identify as women or BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, or Person of Color. JMT continues to expand diversity and belonging with new BRGs in development.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion is ingrained in everything we do here at RSNH. We are committed to strengthening DEI initiatives by fostering our organizational culture with recently implemented employee resource groups for women, LGBTQ+, and Black employees, with more to come. This January, we held a DB outreach event in Dallas, Texas to expand our partnership to local small businesses, and we plan to hold several more throughout this year. We believe if we deliberately lead with empathy and prioritize DEI in our culture, our associates and community can work together for a long-term partnership.
At DY Consultants, we are recognized for our professional work and diversity. We pride ourselves in our recruitment process in selecting talented individuals with various ethnic backgrounds while providing opportunities for advancement internally. At DY, we embrace diversity and the broad perspectives and creative solution it brings to the table. As an employee, I appreciate being part of an organization that embraces diversity.
The projects I worked on focused on diversity and equity within the Port Authority Police Department recruitment and the Academy to help address the challenges and barriers of diversity within the PAPD. Police departments should recruit and retain workforces that reflect the diversity within their jurisdictions.
At the Burns Engineering Los Angeles office, we're an active participant in DE&I initiatives. We serve in the Small Business Certification Program with the local Chamber of Commerce and also helped establish their first ever DE&I committee. We're looking forward to working with the local community and all the businesses and understanding how to implement DE&I.
MJ's Thought Leader program, an extension of its diversity initiative, provided me the opportunity to volunteer during Mass in Boston, encouraging middle school students into pursuing civil engineering.
In support of fostering and improving diversity in the engineering and transportation industry, our employee owners are proud to announce the establishment of the McFarland Johnson STEM Diversity Scholarship.
In February 2020, at our business meeting, and after much discussion, we committed to the relentless pursuit of diversity in our organization. And we were further motivated to take real action after the senseless and brutal murder of George Floyd later that year. We formed an IDEA Alliance, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Awareness Alliance. We came up with a core purpose, which is
to promote personal and professional growth
by cultivating and sustaining a safe and inclusive atmosphere
where everyone can feel a sense of belonging,
by encouraging everyone to bring their whole selves.
We will create a diverse and equitable environment where all of our voices are heard.
Wow, thank you so much. Yes, can you all unmute and just if you can, just round of applause to all of those organizations that are, focusing on DE&I. I'm so proud. And the first time I did see this, I did get a little teary-eyed, but then I've seen it like a million times. So now I'm like, we can edit it like this and we can edit it like that. But the first time I saw it, I did get a little teary-eyed. Again, I want to thank Urban Engineers. I see Chris Gubino, he's on. Chris and his team worked with us to make sure this video was as great as it can be, and it is great. And again, just want to thank all of those. And these are just some of those individuals that wanted to put in the video. And I know there are a lot of other folks in the Northeast chapter and across the aviation industry that are doing so much. And we just want to celebrate you and highlight you. Okay, so with that said, we're going to roll right into our Women's History Month celebration. Our president, Melinda Montgomery, issued a challenge to our membership and our supporters earlier this month. The challenge was for you to show us your women leaders and for us to celebrate them and recognize them during this summit. So I'm happy to say this morning, I went on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I'm missing probably a lot of other social media networks, but these are the only ones I have. And I looked up the hashtag that we issued for Women's History Month. And we just want to go through those because it's really important to show women and representation in aviation, because it's just like Melinda said, this is what others see and can aspire to. So Laura, can you go to the next slide? We're just going to run through these really quickly. Starting with Melinda and her team of women leaders at Trenton Mercer Airport. So thank you, Melinda, for doing the challenge, and thank you for being our president for this chapter. So next slide. Atkins. So Atkins, these are their women engineers. I recognize a handful of the faces on the screen and love to see, as a fellow engineer myself, love to see other women engineers in the aviation industry. So thank you, Atkins, for participating in the challenge. Next. Syracuse Regional Airport. They were creative in this photo. I'm not quite sure what they're doing with the measuring tape. Maybe they're showing that they're standing 6 feet together. I'm not sure, but love the creativity in the photo. So thank you, Syracuse, for participating in the challenge. Next. The Thrasher Group. So love that they were participating in this challenge from the airport conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania last week. I saw that they mentioned that the importance of networking and learning new things in the aviation industry, and the women that are there representing the Thrasher Group. So great job. Next. So I might be a little biased on this one, but this is the women that I work alongside of at the City of Philadelphia's Division of Aviation, which is Philadelphia International Airport and Northeast Philadelphia Airport. And a fun fact, or a fact I think that I celebrate every day, is that 50% of the leadership at PHL and PNE are women. So I'm proud to work for an organization that is 50-50, like how it should be. And I think that is all we had as of 10 a.m. this morning. I want to say we have that challenge open till the end of the month. So you have 8 more days to participate in this. If you do participate, use the hashtag, and we'll make sure that we recognize you on our social media platforms as well at the end of Women's History Month. So thank you again, and thanks, Melinda, for the idea. I thought it was great, and I love to see who all was going to participate and how creative they were going to get. All right, so now we're going to finally turn to our event. But before I do that, I have some wonderful news that I wanted to share with everybody. Kiva Rodriguez is joining me for the leadership of the DE&I committee for the Northeast chapter. She is the Deputy Chief Engineer for the Maryland Aviation Administration and is passionate about community service and mentoring. I believe she was the first one, or maybe one of the first people that I recruited to join the DE&I committee in 2019 when it was formed. I remember tracking her down at the Hershey Airports Conference and saying, hey, you, I need you to be in my DE&I committee. And she said yes, and she's been one of the most active members of the DE&I committee. And when the opportunity came, she rose to the challenge. And I'm so happy and thrilled that she is joining me in this adventure, or in this journey. And she is joining me as the vice chair. So again, Kiva, thank you so much. And as her first duty, it was putting together this Women's History Month event. So she did that from A to Z. And I'm going to hand it over to her to take on the rest of the panel and the session. Thank you, Kiva.
Well, thank you, Api. I am just kind of warmed by your words. And yes, I do remember that day that, you recruited me, and it wasn't so much a recruitment as it was an assignment. So, and I always show up for an assignment. So, hello, everyone. I want to welcome you again to our Women's History Month Virtual Summit. I am excited to introduce you to our panelists today. I've been so fortunate to have the opportunity to have one-on-one conversations with each of these women, and each time I walked away with two conclusions. And the first conclusion is that Api and I really knocked it out of the park with this amazing lineup of speakers today, so I'll pat myself on the back. Api, you should do the same. And, and I can't wait to jump into our conversation so that you too can discover how accomplished and creative and intelligent each one of them is. And the second conclusion is that each of these wonderful women could easily fill a 90-minute summit alone, just by sharing their stories and their successes from beginning all the way until this present moment. And we only have a short time to chat, so I will get started. Now, I will introduce our panelists, and after each introduction, I will ask them to share their view on mentorship. If you want to learn more about them, then please feel free to click on their photos on the event announcement. Actually, I encourage you all to do that. You will be in awe of their accomplishments and absolutely inspired by their journeys. So first, I'll start with Gladys Diva Brown. She is the airport director at Yuma International Airport. And under her guidance, the airport received the Arizona Airport of the Year Award in 2015 and again in 2021. And through the course of her tenure as director, she's received several recognitions and awards. And sometime this year, she will be featured in Arizona's Most Inquiring Women, second edition book, which features 48 women in leadership in the state of Arizona. So Gladys, I want to ask you now to take a minute to share what you are doing to create or maybe maintain a culture of mentorship, especially for women in your organization.
I think for us, it's really important that we recognize the potential in each of our team members, but also what we can give back to the community. So a lot of the times when we are approached about mentoring a student or a young professional, or even an experienced professional that needs a little bit more guidance, a lot of the times we go into an agreement to say, when we mentor, we also get mentored. So we try to make sure that it's a very organic conversation and it's a built relationship. And where we can be very vulnerable. So in mentorship, we kind of set some ground rules to really place everything on the table, to know that when the door is closed, so to speak, and we have those conversations that are very open, especially about challenges, we want them to feel safe. And then when they leave, that everything kind of stays in that lockbox, but with a goal that we're going to achieve for one another. So I always feel like when we mentor, it's on both sides. And so a lot of the times we have to go in knowing that they're looking for guidance or some direction or even a venting moment or time, but also it can happen both ways because we're always constantly learning. So our view is it doesn't matter what age or what level of experience and education that we take on anyone we can, especially if I always say busy is like the excuse in which is very acceptable. So I say that we carve out time, even if it's 15 minutes or, once a month or whatever it looks like. But we try, and I know I try to mentor even whatever I do, and anyone who takes that time and effort, we just work together to do that. But our work culture encourages that too. And then we also encourage and support them out in the community as well. So it's just allotting that time and then making sure that, they don't have to take away from family time. So everybody knows a part of our mentorship is incorporating them into the family. And once you're family forever, even if they advance themselves later or leave for whatever reason it is, they're always a part of our family. And that's kind of a part of our mentorship mentality, is that we're always there for each other for the rest of our lives. And so that's a part of it, because you're sharing all those intimate things that you're insecure about in being mentored or through that mentorship.
That's amazing. I totally agree. It's that perspective of nurturing leadership, if you will, where you're still a leader, but you're kind of on that journey with them. That's amazing. Thank you so much. So now I want to introduce Dana Donati, and she is the CEO of United Aviate Academy. And prior to this role, Dana was the general manager and director of academic programs at Lift Academy, where she was responsible for facilitating the startup of a Part 141 certificate, the approval of 2 Department of Labor apprenticeship programs, and the onboarding of over 700 Flight Academy students. Dana also spent 11 years with Republic Airways, serving in various positions such as Assistant Chief Pilot, First Officer, and Captain. And aside from her role as CEO, Dana is also a member of the FAA's Women in Aviation Advisory Board. I think some of us have heard a little bit about that lately. And this board is charged with developing and providing recommendations and strategies to the FAA to explore opportunities to encourage female students and aviators to pursue a career in aviation, which is directly in line with our conversation today. And now, Dana, I want to ask you to please share what you are doing to either create a culture of mentorship or maintain that culture in your organization.
Thank you, Kiva. So as the CEO of United 88 Academy, our goal is to bring on 50% females and people of color into aviation. And, in this environment, it is super important to mentor students and our staff, because I wouldn't be where I am today without those mentors that helped me along the way. Something that we do specific for our students is once a month, we host a session where we pick a topic. Yesterday was grit. Other conversations focused around pace and perseverance. And we ask 3 questions and we talk about those things that the students might be struggling with, because, they might not approach us with their concerns because they fear any issues in the program, or they don't want to show that they're not capable, but we want to make sure that we're bringing up information and mentorship and different situations that occur to many of us, so they understand how to maneuver their career and what to do. When it comes to the staff, definitely one-on-one meetings with my team. We actually do a weekly team meeting where everyone is involved, because we want everybody to come to the table discussing any challenges that they're seeing in the academy, but also solutions. And we work through these solutions together, but then focusing on those one-on-one as situations arise.
Well, that's great. And honestly, navigating your career, especially as a woman, that is such an important skill set. And it's so wonderful that you are allowing that space to learn so much. And I think that even these topics are going to be really valuable to our audience. So thank you for sharing that. So now I want to introduce Allison McKay. She is the CEO of Women in Aviation International. And she is responsible for the future strategic vision of the more than 14,000 member strong organization. Now, Allison previously served as vice president of the Helicopter Association International Foundation, where she commissioned the first academic study of staffing projections for the rotorcraft industry, as well as creating a workforce development initiative. Now, she is also currently serving as a member of the FAA's Women in Aviation Advisory Board as well. Now, Allison, I think the audience would like to know what you're doing to maintain a culture of mentorship in your organization.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to meet new women in this space. They inspire me. Our organization, one of its main pillars is mentorship. And we kind of do that in a number of different ways. It starts with our youth and our Girls in Aviation Day events, which are held worldwide in the fall. And we connect young women with mentors in our industry that they may be interested in pursuing a career path with. So it's very important for us to see ourselves in the future career we want. And that is kind of how it starts, is at a very young age. I can see an astronaut that looks like me. I can see a pilot or a maintenance technician. And then once you're in your career, we host an annual conference. We just got through it last week. And we brought 4,600 people together to share their stories, to network, to find mentors. We have sessions specifically designed around mentoring. But also it's just seeing women that look like you. You may be the 1 or the 2 in your organization. And so over those 3 days, it's very important that we bring those people together so they feel less isolated. And then, of course, on our website, we have a virtual way to connect with mentors. So you can say, hey, I live here. This is what I do. I'd love to find somebody that does my job. And so we can virtually connect you as well.
That's wonderful. And you know that you really have kind of resonated with the topic of you can't be what you can't see. It's hard to, picture yourself in a position when you haven't seen anyone that looks like you or may have experienced the same things that you are experiencing. So that's very powerful. Thank you so much, Allison. And last but not least, we have Ebony Wimbush. And Ebony is the CEO of the Airport Minority Advisory Council, or AMAC. And she is leading the effort to advance equitable opportunities and to maximize the participation of minorities and women throughout the aviation and aerospace industries. Now, she served as the Deputy Director of the Baltimore City Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success, where she built and implemented several successful strategies. And she served as Chief of Staff at the Baltimore City Department of Transportation. So she holds a Bachelor of Science from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and she has a rich career in the private sector with several Fortune 500 companies. Now, Ebony, can you share what you are doing to create a culture of mentorship in AMAC?
So I first want to thank you, Kiva and Api, for inviting me to this conversation. And really thank you, and I have to include Melinda in that, for your leadership in this Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. It's very, very important. Last but not least, this is an amazing panel of women. And so I'm just really excited to hear such experienced, accomplished women in this space, because as we know, it certainly is a male-dominated industry. So I'll start with this. Mentorship matters. It especially matters in male-dominated industries, right? So mentoring women in particular allows us to learn from one another. It allows us to sometimes gain access to opportunities. It cultivates confidence. You talked a little bit about AMAC's mission in our organization, but certainly one of those things is advancing the full participation of women and minorities in the aviation space. One of our strengths as an organization really has been the power of our network, the power of our connectedness, the power of leveraging that network for success. And for over 38 years, we've really been doing that organically. And we've developed a culture of mentorship in part because of our mission. We know that formal mentorship is important as well. And through our Aviation Professional Development Committee, of which Kiva is a very active and engaged member, and I want to thank you for that. We have launched a new program called the AMAC Builds Career Program, and it's really focused to build that pipeline of women and minorities to participate in this industry. It targets people at different ages, right? And different stages of their career, starting at the very beginning of their career in college, right? And ensuring that college students have the opportunity to see what this diverse industry looks like, right? Anything you want to be, you can be in the aviation industry. So we've got a structured internship program that allows college students to participate, followed by a mentorship program, a formal mentorship program for people who have a little more experience in their career, and gives them the opportunity to have those conversations that perhaps they don't want to have with their direct managers, to share personal and professional goals, and to get different perspective in terms of how they navigate certain things. And then one of the things I'm really proud of is our fellowship program for people who aspire to be at the top of the industry, for senior level professionals who, in particular this cycle, aspire to be airport managers. So we have got a program called, or an initiative called, our Airport Leadership Collective, in which more than 35 current and past airport directors participate, and they are volunteering their time. These airport directors, including your airport director, Ricky Smith, as well as Perry Little, who is one of the vice chairs of AAAE, they are volunteering their time to participate in a fellowship and really guide people
through their careers and to help them ascend to that top level. So, we are really proud of some of the things that we're doing and really helping people navigate through this industry. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to, I'm so glad that this kind of gave you the opportunity to give a little plug for AMAC Builds Careers. That is something that is near and dear to my heart. That's why I'm so happy to be joined today with all of you wonderful women who are obviously very focused on not only leading the teams of folks that you have in place, but also thinking about the future. And with that, as we talk about maximizing these opportunities for women and people that we are leading and nurturing to take, a place of take up space in this industry, I want to know, what does equality look like to you? And given your position, what is your plan to achieve it and also to maintain it? Because I'm obviously, to me, you all would not be engaged in some of these initiatives unless it was already there, or at least that the building blocks were already there and in place. So I'll start off with Ebony, and if you can share with us, with what equality looks like to you.
So I actually want us to think about the difference between equality and equity. Often people think they're the same thing, and they are not, actually. So AMAC is focused on equity. GWU, so George Washington University, they actually published an article not too long ago about the difference of equity and equality, and I encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's short, but it's really an informative article, and it talks about, while the terms of equity and equality sound similar, the implementation of one versus the other can lead to dramatically different outcomes for marginalized people, including women, right? So equality, when you think about that, that means individuals or groups of people are given the same resources and opportunities. Equity recognizes that there are different circumstances, there are different situations, there are different systems in place, and equity really allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed for people to reach that equal outcome. And that is a significant difference in outcomes. So at AMAC, our vision is focused on creating economic equity, access, and wealth for women and minorities in this industry. I think one of the most impactful ways to truly achieve equity is through advocacy. And, systems that are in place, sometimes they take policy changes, right? They take legislative changes. And so one of the things that AMAC has done since the history of our organization is really be at the forefront of legislation and policy that advocates for women and minorities. And so I think, what are we doing? We are starting with that dialogue. We are continuing with that dialogue. We are dialoguing with lawmakers and rulemakers to help them understand the issues. Actually, so we're coming off, I'm coming off my first conference with AMAC just yesterday. We had our Economic Opportunity and Policy Forum, and we had several lawmakers, congresspeople who participated, including Congressman Larson, Congresswoman Holmes, Congressman Johnson, and Congressman Mfume. But some of the things that we talked about is creating more opportunity in the legislation that can be changed to allow for more opportunity for women and minorities. Very specifically, Congressman Johnson has reintroduced a bill to that effect. So what are we doing? We're doing a lot of things, but I really think, and two, being a public servant and a part of local government, one of the most impactful things you can do is through advocacy and changing policy and law. Thank you.
Of course, and with that, I will, modify this question to ask about equity. And thank you, Ebony, for differentiating between the two. And given the conversation, I think that would be such a powerful point for us to really dive into. So Dana, I will pose that question to you. What does equity look like to you, especially given your position as CEO of this United AAAE Academy?
Thank you. I would agree that advocacy is a huge, if not the focus on how we can bring equity to aviation. With our work on the Women in Aviation Advisory Board first, before I go into UAA, it was simple things like uniforms. Uniforms as for pilots and mechanics are they all fit men, right? So like we had to fit into male uniforms. So those are some of the changes that we were bringing to industry. And then when it comes to maternity leave and some of the rules around, FMLA, how can we get this stuff looked at differently? Because, when you are taking care of your family and you're expected to work a schedule that is, basically a 24/7, and it works into 24/7 operation, there needs to be some consideration on how women fit into this space. When it comes to United Aviate Academy, it's partnering with organizations like Women in Aviation, OBAP, and PAPA, and making sure that we're casting this wide net, but we're thinking about the challenges that people might have coming into the industry: lack of awareness, lack of education, lack of resources. So how can we not only advocate but educate all different organizations in different schools and different resources like guidance counselors and teachers to make sure that everybody is aware of what this career holds and how we can better advocate for those students.
Yeah, advocacy is key. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's interesting to even think of something, what some may think is so benign as a uniform, but if you're not comfortable, you don't feel like you belong, right? So it's a physical manifestation of what that may feel like for many who are trying to assimilate to an industry, and what that can really how that may affect them. So now I'm going to turn to Gladys and ask if you have any thoughts on this topic of what equity looks like, and given your position, what is your plan to achieve it in your organization?
So I do, and I really appreciate Ebony starting it off, because we challenge each other with equality and equity all the time here at our airport. And I always say we're small, but we're mighty. And then for everybody who's at a very larger scale airport or firm or organization, just make it exponential, right? So just use my little small model and multiply it however you need to. But I can tell you that first, on equality, I always say we try to give every resource to all of our team members and employees, and down to the uniforms. Like, I know everybody sees me, I'm kind of like the walking billboard, but I also ensure that every team member has a uniform that they pick and that I embroider so that they feel good, they look good, but everybody gets it and I pay for that, and that's one way in which we provide just the very basics, even down to their shoes. Like, I will provide a pair of shoes and a jacket and everything, just so that they feel good and they don't feel like they have to take on that responsibility, especially for some of our single parents here, both men and women, but especially we have some that are a single mom raising not just their children, but there's their children's children too. And so we have a lot of that here in our community, in our team. So we go into what's equitable, right? So I always tell people, and there's a great, real quick article, same thing, I'm like Ebony, I research all these different things. We go and I tell them, we all go out to the farm and we get to the apple tree. And I say, hey, you pick as many apples as you want. And everyone says, great. Well, I'm 6 feet tall, but one of my other team members, she's 5 feet tall. Well, I'm going to obviously pick more apples than her, unless I give her something that's going to make it just as equitable, like a ladder or a bigger satchel, or I'm going to help and pass them off to her and we're going to work together. So equality is easy a lot of the times because we can throw out all the resources there. But if that mom doesn't have the time to go to school, what good is an academic program that's going to go and give her the money to go to school? So what we do is we integrate it into our workday. So what we do is we promote the autonomy and the ability to work with each department director to adjust so that they can also have I don't even say it's a work-life balance, but an integration of work and life. So that way they can modify schedules in order to get those and feel accomplished, or get the certification, or work around in which they can feel that they can accomplish more, which they never had in another place. That's one of the things that we do constantly to ensure that each team member can have a resource here, and then also adjust time schedules to get what they need. Again, that's done on like a local level. So I always say, well, you know, that works for you, but it may not work for me. And the truth is, it does if you ask. And that's the other thing that we talk about when it comes to being equitable. Like, I don't know that opportunity wasn't presented or given to you. So we need to have that conversation, and that happens through that one-on-one and that ability, again, in mentorship both ways, that you teach me what I didn't learn or that I didn't pick up on, and that we can adjust and go together. So the advocacy, again, on the lobbying and understanding on changing law, but also internally, like, what do you do with your staff and team members to create that culture that's very guilt-free? And I'll tell you that because as a woman in a career, there was a time in which no one knew that I had 3 kids under 5 and I had a spouse that was constantly deployed. And not only that, not just deployed, but in a war zone while I'm trying to figure out what to do here, and also wait for that call to see what he's doing or what's happening to him. Or they didn't know that there was a time in my life that nobody had any understanding about my health, or that I was going through a divorce and I was carrying on all this burden and selling a house and going down to nothing and trying to figure out where to live. But that was nobody's worry. But I also was trying to figure out, how do I take care of my team? Because that's one of the things we bring to the table, is how nurturing and caring and thoughtful that we may be. So again, on equity, I just try to make sure that even though I have all of the resources I provide to them, am I giving them the equal chance to exercise those resources and to feel that they can accomplish? And it even goes down to volunteering programs. Like, you give a lot of your time, but sometimes you wish you can just give $200 to get the shirts for this special event for this nonprofit that you've been donating years and years to. So we created a community program that you tell me what it is that you've been doing, and that we will use our marketing money and funds and create this program, and we'll give you money on your behalf to that organization that you've been putting your time into. So again, equality, having the ability with all these resources, and equity to be able to exercise that based on those needs and what you need to feel accomplished, even though you may say, man, I could have used that $200 too for myself. And again, we say, well, what does that look like and how can we make it happen? So it's a day by day, and it changes, and everybody knows today is very uncertain. We watch inflation happen. And so I always say this too, look at your team members. Watch how they are, the nonverbal portion of it. Look if they haven't been sleeping. Talk to that person. And you don't have to be intrusive. It doesn't have to feel like you're prying. Just say, hey, is there anything I can do for you? Do you need any help? As a single mom, sometimes like that makes a world of difference. And then they see the mayhem. So I want everyone to know it's crazy here. It was crazy this morning. Before I got here, I was like, Lord, I'm gonna be on this camera. I'm gonna have to talk about equity. And at the same time, I'm like, how am I equitable with 6 kids and trying to figure out what's fair when they keep comparing to the first one? Like, so again, I had like my own challenge before I got here, but the biggest thing in equity is you can give every resource, but think about what more they may need in order to feel accomplished or get there.
That's wonderful. And actually, I wanted to jump to a burning question I've had, and I've kind of posed it to you, a couple of you off camera. And before we get there, actually, Ebony, it looks like you have something you want to add.
Yeah, I do. I'd encourage everyone who is on the phone and the organizations that, one, I was really warmed by the video and seeing all of the, the work that's being done. But I would encourage you guys to start with a training, right? Start with understanding really terms, what equity means to me, what equity means to, each person on this phone, or any of these other terms in this DEI space are sometimes different. And starting with a baseline and understanding and shared understanding of what that means in your organizations, I think is really, really important. And so I would just encourage those out there listening to really think about how can you come with that shared knowledge, that shared understanding. And for me, it always starts with training.
And also Kiva and Ebony, I do want to say that's hugely important in the DEINA on the accessibility side of the house. So as simple as one, no one needs to always remind me I've got kids. I always tell them like, that's great. Like, I love it. Sometimes please just ask me how I'm doing. Kids are great. Obviously I'm going crazy. And the same thing goes to like sometimes, and I know for everybody here is a quick example on equity. Sometimes when you ask a question, like I don't even think about it. I'll ask a guy like, hey, does this color look good or whatever? And he's like, I'm colorblind. Like, I'm like, oh, geez, I didn't even think about that. Or one of our team members actually said, I know some people want to know the story, but I have no hand. Like, I don't know it. Like, this is just what has happened. I wish people wouldn't ask sometimes. And it's not even our team. They just want to talk about it. And so we become very sensitive to that. And so sometimes it's asking the question, doing the training, and then learning about keywords to help each other. And that's a part of learning about equity, is where do those fine lines and healthy boundaries start and begin or end? And then also, what do we need to make sure that we encourage and mentor them and make them successful into the future?
Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much. And Ebony, that's such a strong point. And thank you, Gladys. It's such a good point about training, right, and education. I had the opportunity to sit on a cohort within the Maryland Department of Transportation for Diversity. And a good part of that was about education. And there's even an education in learning how to talk about the topic. And that's something that Appy and I have talked about kind of on our one-on-ones with each other, of making sure that our membership, and anyone else in the audience who is thinking of joining our committee, how we can stay sharp in that discussion. If we're going to go out and be advocates on this topic, then we should be educated and also comfortable enough to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. Thank you for that, Gladys, amongst our peers. So absolutely. And leading off from what Gladys was just talking about, this was a question I kind of posed to a couple of you. I too am a mom, and I don't hide it. A lot of people know kind of what's going on, probably better what's going on with my daughter's schedule than I do. But there are historical social norms, and women are typically charged with carrying the primary responsibility of caring for family members while navigating career growth. So what is your perspective on how this can be best achieved? Maybe it's from your personal experience, or maybe it's some part of the program that you are managing or you're overseeing, or any other tools that you could possibly share with everyone. So I will start with Dana, and then we'll kind of go around from here.
Oh, I was hoping to learn from everybody else, because I'm not sure if I have that one figured out yet. No, I mean, I'm blessed with two boys. I have a husband who's a pilot. So it is really just a shared, environment. Funny story, we bought each of like my kids a vacuum. And it's like everybody's taking a piece of the housework. Everybody owns a piece of this house, and you are going to do the job to make sure that we're all surviving here. But I truly thought about that, and I don't know if I'd have like an answer that would be a benefit. I think from the corporate side of things, it truly is understanding. So we all have different responsibilities here on our team. And it's understanding that, on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock, I'm going to be out of the office because my kid has soccer practice that afternoon. And it's just this understanding that if something's going to happen, then I have somebody here to take that, space or take that responsibility on, understanding that somebody might have, a death in the family that they have to handle for a week. So they're going to work at home as they're still, figuring out, funeral situations. Like, it's really just understanding each other's responsibility. I mean, we obviously have rules and policies in place because you definitely need structure. But when you work closely with the team and we all, put in the work ethic, understanding that things do come up, that, our family is our number one, responsibility in our lives, and just sharing that responsibility here at work, I think makes for a cohesive team.
Thank you. And Allison, I mean, women in aviation, it has to be, probably a number of stories, within those sessions and conferences on topics that touch on this, because aviation is a demanding industry. So yeah. I would love to hear more about what you all are doing with that.
Well, I think balance is a misnomer. I think maybe at the end of the year, if you could have achieved balance with both, I think that should be good. But at any point in time, it's always off kilter. Personally, for me, I was the person that didn't want anyone to know I had children. I had worked for a decade before I had my first child, and I had never worked with a woman with children. So I didn't have any model to work off of. I worked with the majority of my colleagues, and all of my bosses were men. And when I started having children, I went through 3 male bosses, and I just wanted to prove myself on the value of my work before we muddled it with all of my personal responsibilities. And that was very challenging because mine were in daycare, and they require you to come get them at the same time every day. And so I would always have to leave at a set time. And I remember in one of my reviews, one of my bosses said, I know if I give you advance notice that you will stay later, but sometimes I wish you would just stay later because you wanted to. And I was like, you clearly have no idea what it is like to balance work and family. And so that was really baffling to me. And then we got a woman in, and she had, she was incredibly accomplished. And when she interviewed, she said, I can only be in the office 3 days a week. My kids, she lived far from the office. My kids have XYZ. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I need to work from home. And I was like, you could just say that? These are the things that I need. It was like completely eye-opening to me that is how women who've accomplished and achieved, they know their worth. I think that's super important for us to understand our worth. And we belong in this space, and we bring something to the table. So personal aside, I have 3 boys, and yes, it's very demanding. And so I look to, especially with my own team, to understand what they need. I think that the pandemic has afforded us the ability to function really well in a work from home environment. And so if you need to go get your kid at 2, if you have to take them to the doctors, work can get done outside of this 9 to 5 parameter that was just this outdated model. And I think that is part of equity, is understanding how do you meet each person where they are and what their needs are. It's like raising kids, right? Kid 1 needs something completely different than kid 2 needs. And so to parent them properly, you have to understand what they need to thrive. And that's the battle, is how do you get to know your employees well enough to understand what they need to thrive in their workforce. And we also do that at conference. We have panels on women who want to be pilots, but they also want to be mothers. And so we will put them in front of women who have done the Dana Donatis of the world. They've done both, and their husband is a pilot. Tell me how that works. I don't even understand how that's possible, but we do that because it is possible. And if we show them somebody who has done it, then they feel like they can too. I don't want you to think that you have to bail out of the workforce because you can't do both. And that's one of the main, I think, benefits of being part of an organization like mine. We represent all career fields and all industry segments, and there are different needs for each. And so hopefully we can match you with somebody that can tell you in advance that, yes, it's possible. This is how I did it. You may need to do all these things in advance to set it up properly, but it is possible.
That is such an important topic. And Allison, I will be pinging you offline to get that title again. It's so important. Like Api, I come from engineering, and the same. I didn't think that it was right to talk about wanting a family, having a family. And I had to try to figure out what was normal and what wasn't. And I didn't have an example. And so, because, it's a male dominated industry. And so that was something that I've now just said, oh, you know what? Oh, forget it. Look, I have a kid. This is what she needs to do. I will get this done, but I still have to take her to Girl Scouts. I have to. And
I think that comes with age too. You're less afraid to be who you are. Mm-hmm. But I think we all need to do that. We need to have our voice. Dana and I, on that advisory board, we work with an engineer. Her name is Kelly Yost, and she tells this story about how her work was so demanding, so many hours. She had 2 young kids, and she was at the breaking point. And she decided that she was just going to stop working. She just couldn't do both anymore. Not because she wanted to necessarily be a stay-at-home mother. While that is fantastic, but she also wanted to work. She just couldn't do them both. And her boss just male boss randomly checked in with her and said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And she was like, "Oh my God," just dumped the emotional load. And he said, "Well, what about going part-time?" And she said, "If I hadn't used my voice, I probably would have left a career I love."
Wow. Ebony, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to add a different twist. So I too am a mother. I'm a proud mother of one 24-year-old young man that graduated in COVID, and he's soaring and working, which is,
You're living the dream.
COVID, young people had difficulty getting jobs. But I want to challenge the listeners today. You guys are leaders in your companies. And it doesn't matter if you're at the top, you're leaders in your company, right? And I would say that the workforce of the future, this is not just about women having flexibility. This is about the workforce of the future wants flexibility. And so if you are going to recruit and retain and attract, I should say, the best talent out there, you're going to have to create policies that allow for it. And so that means too, today men are taking parental leave when they have families, right? So that means that you should start thinking about and looking at how you can change your policy to make this a norm. This is not a women's issue, right? This is an issue for everyone. I'd also challenge you to not just have those policies in place, but to live them, right? So we talk about flexible work schedules, but then there's that boss that, they don't demonstrate any flexibility. They're there from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, right? So if you're allowing for flexibility, even if you go home and work from 6 to 8, but demonstrate it. Show people it's okay to have a flexible schedule, to work from home, right? So I would just challenge each of you in your own ways to advocate in your companies for policies that allow flexibility, that allow that take into consideration issues that are not just women issues, that are family issues.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that. As I started the question off with historical social norms, and I was very intentional with that wording because, I think there's been assumptions that, women would be the ones to take a step back in their careers, when in fact, dynamics are changing. And, people in general decide to do what is best for their personal situation. So absolutely, I'm so glad that you brought that up. So now I want to talk a little bit about exclusivity versus inclusivity. Aviation doesn't always feel accessible or inclusive. Dana shared this statistic in one of the promotional videos for United Aviate Academy. 6% of pilots are women, and 6% of pilots are people of color. And AMAC found that in 2018, African Americans held just 5.6% of airport management positions and 6.5% of airport executive positions. So, Ebony, can you give some examples of how AMAC is breaking down the walls of exclusivity to create an environment of inclusivity?
Thanks for that question, Kiva. So I'm new to AMAC. I am almost 5 months into my role as president and CEO here. And one of the things that everyone said to me as I was getting to know the organization is AMAC feels like a family, right? And I'll just tell you, as a part of our culture, right, we start with ourselves. So we're welcoming in that way. But I'll go to your question. We're breaking down those barriers because first, representation matters. You heard many of people on the phone or on the Zoom call today say that you've got to see it to believe it. And that is absolutely true. For me, I was exposed to aviation at a very early stage in my life. My mother was a flight attendant, but she knew that, she wanted more for me, right? She wanted me to aspire for higher. And so she exposed me to careers in aviation, which led me to Embry-Riddle. And so we are doing just that. We're breaking down those barriers. We are making it an inclusive environment, starting with our foundation. We are demonstrating to young people that aviation and careers in aviation are attainable for everyone. And so we've got wonderful programs that we go into high schools, a program called Project Lift, and we share with them all the aspects of careers in aviation. We do hands-on programs. We stay in touch with those young people because when they get to college, we're offering scholarships. But one of the exciting new programs, and I actually was glad to see Gladys on here, that we are launching. So this Airport Leadership Collective, their goal is really helping people behind them understand that this is not just a male-dominated industry, and this is not just a white male-dominated industry. And we are having and hosting a series of quarterly conversations. We're calling Bridging the Cultural Divide, right? But this is a series of fireside chats with women leaders in the industry. The first one is March the 31st, and our very own panelist, Gladys Brown, is going to be a part of that conversation. It'll also include Cynthia Goodry from Long Beach Airport, Thela Bowens, who was the former CEO at San Diego County Regional Airport, and Angela Gittens, who was the former Atlanta Hartsfield Airport and the former Director General at ACI. But they'll be talking about navigating the political landscape, right? Management psychology, self-promotion and presence, and a whole host of other topics around leadership and how women in particular, how the things that they need to be thinking about navigating through learning as they aspire to move in different directions in their career. So we're doing it through a lot of our programming, and that's just one.
I will be adding that to my calendar. Thank you, Ebony, and I'm sure I'll hear plenty about it between now and then. So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully others will check out the website and see that event. Gladys, I'm going to turn to you, and hopefully you don't give too much away before the event, but can you give some examples of how your organization is breaking down those walls of exclusivity to create an environment of inclusivity?
So very similar, I kind of take Ebony, what she just spoke about, and we do it on a local level. So of course, starting with kids all the way to, we call them the runners. That's like it's like our kinder and below group where you need a 1-to-1 ratio because they take you off on that flight line. That's like an exercise all on itself. But I'll tell you, we try to start in that group, and a lot of them, it is nice. Like I walk out there and it feels familiar. You guys all spoke about that too. They see someone, they look very similar. I kind of pass for everything you can think of that you under the sun pretty much. And it depends on what time of the year. I always tell them I'm like a little chameleon. I don't know. It's like, do I get a little lighter, a little darker? No one knows. Do I speak Spanish or not? Am I from the Polynesian Islands? I mean, I blend in everywhere, which is always fun. But those kids get interested, and then they say, well, what did you do? Where'd you come from? You know, and of course I create like a fun story so they never forget me. But the truth is I actually was raised by a bunch of sailors. My father was a sailor. So when I was 13, he exposed me to pipe fitting and industrial machinery, and he was an engineer. And so I got out there and I learned how to be a pipe fitter when I was 14. Little did I know that later into college, I would go to a merchant marine academy and then become a pipe fitter. But again, a very heavy male dominated field. My father prepped me for that. And I can say this because he told me this. He said, hey, I'm an old crotchety white man, and this is what you're going to have to deal with when you get into the industry. And it was actually after the day I like pierced my nose because I thought it would be fun to do that the day I graduated college. He's like, what are you doing? Like, do you understand what we see when we see that? And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, but I just wanted to do it. I pulled it right out because it hurt. So again, kind of like living my best life. I tell you, at 22, I made some fun decisions, but those were reversible, right? I'll also tell you, I know Allison talked about leaving right at a certain time. I worked for an engineering firm and one of them made that comment. So what I did is I went and picked up my kid in my kitty gate, and then I sectioned off my cubicle and I worked the entire time he was there. He was like my most type A surveying civil engineer. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You want me to work all night long." So that includes babysitting. And I said, and by the way, he has to have playtime. So I like unleashed the gate and let him run through the whole office. And then beknownst to me, he like invited me to church, like let me bring the kid in on Saturday, would like get his running shoes on because he would run around the office with them. But nobody had that relationship with him. So I also was able to create a different kind of culture starting with him because he was the hardest engineer to deal with and also to like break down. But I always tell them challenge accepted. So I always, again, being inclusive, I make sure that we have all the resources we can do. And I always tell people, be careful what you ask for, because I opened up every floodgate in this airport. So when COVID happened, we had the hardest challenge, right? We had working parents that had children at home, some who had older children at home that they're going to take care of for the rest of their life. And their spouses that were, some of them were women, were off working, and we had to figure out what can we do to accommodate their schedule, and then also their childcare schedule, because now they weren't in school neither. And then all of the systems that used to be that they can bring them to temporarily were closed. So we took our little tiny war rooms and we created daycare centers. And then each of us would check in, make sure they had snacks. Everybody can put up their Netflix or whatever it is in between. We would double check to make sure they're doing their homework. So that way the team member understood that everything we had here was not just exclusive. So I always say this to just the executives, that C-suite had that option because they had a larger office, they can close their door. We said every office is yours. So let's go and incorporate everything. And so kind of like on a small scale, that's the way we include everyone. Out in the community, like I do everything I can to get kids flying. Like I do everything I can to show them the different professions. And when I'm like, I don't care about flying, but I love people. I'm like, oh, human resources. Like then when I listen to their soft skills, I'm like, oh, maybe not human resources, but then I say, well, let's work through this, right? I went to a junior achievement biz town on Monday, and oh, they said, what do you need? I said, besides a nap, I need to understand what CEO is he going to be working for. And what town is she running? Because I got to watch that one when she runs her town. And that one, we are all taking breaks all day long because he is not watching or paying attention. And so I kind of like take that opportunity to kind of see that generation in their own environment. And it is mayhem. And they try to pitch to me that it was organized chaos in that whole inclusive environment. I was like, this is not organized, and this is most definitely chaos. But I think for us, it's getting out there, doing exactly, I mean, Ebony, Allison, Dana all touched on it. It's being present. It's also showing them they have the opportunity, and then teaching them what it all is. Like our industry is phenomenal, from consultants all the way through airports. Like we are our own little world. Like I think back when I was just, and I don't, no offense, when I was just an engineer. I know that's a hard time to say that, but when you're in this environment, like being an engineer is phenomenal. Like I never even realized. And I think that's a part of having an inclusive conversation. Now, on the flip side of that, I walk into conversations and it stops very abruptly. I have to make sure that people understand, just because I stepped in the room amongst all of my male counterparts in this community doesn't mean you stop talking, because that means that we were doing something either inappropriate or we don't know whether or not it's a safe topic. Well, the only way we're going to learn is you need to include me in that conversation. And I said, and I'm okay, but I will tell you where those boundaries are. And I think too, it's about delivery and tactfulness too. So in an inclusive world, we have to understand that it's not about hurt feelings. It's about that delivery, and then how we're going to interpret it and how we're going to grow from it. Because it's not always what we want to hear or how we feel, but those feelings and those words are valid for that individual and for that moment. And then what we have to do is figure out, what do we do to grow together? And I think that's a big part of it is coming. I think I love the video, Oppie, that you guys made. You come as who you are. Like, this is who you are. You can't change that. You surely can't change some 40 and 50 years old, because I'll tell you, I'll go to prayer in my office for them alone. But I will say though, they have some wonderful attributes that can really add value to not just our team, but the organization, but the community. And I think public servants are what we are. And it is beautiful. And I tell everyone, we're going to paint the picture we want this future to look like. We're not going to just imagine it. We're going to paint it and we're going to live it. And then we're going to encourage these young future leaders to want to do this. Like, and that's my biggest thing. I'm very approachable, way too animated. No doubt that if I'm on a panel afterwards, it's just a lot of fun. But yeah, I think that's the way we do it, is we just open all the floodgates and make sure folks know we're going to figure out where you fit in. But the truth is, this is the airport. And in the airport, we have all these little subsections and all these little different departments, but somewhere in there, we have a lot of overlap. And so everything is inclusive, even if it feels like, well, you're up here. I'm like, no, actually, I would never be up here if I didn't have all of you here, you know? And so it's just having that conversation and then figuring out what we do from there.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. I'm going to pause here and check with Api. She's helping me facilitate the Q&A, and I have plenty more to ask, but I just wanted to try to break in here and see how we were doing on questions.
So everyone, if you have a comment or a question, feel free to chime in. I know we want to get to your questions as well, as much as we want to have a conversation, or Kiva wants to have a conversation with all of these ladies. They would like to also answer your question. So I see one question, but I think it was answered, and it was directed to Ebony, and it was, what's the source of the article that Ebony mentioned? And I think Patty Clark had responded and said, and provided that link. And then somebody said, yes, Ebony. I was saying yes to all of you as you were making your comment. So I'm not sure which part she was saying yes to, but there are no questions at this time, Kiva. So feel free to continue with your question.
Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. So next, I would just like to kind of, focus a little bit on professional organizations. I think that I've noticed for myself just how empowering they can be. They teach you and help you to develop skill sets that you otherwise may not have had the ability to develop in your own career path. And there are other benefits, I think, but I want to know, what do you think the role of professional organizations should be? And I'll open that up with Allison. We would like to hear from you on that topic.
First, unmute. Yeah, so I think that professional organizations can allow specifically women to address some of the concerns they may have with the industry, to find a soft space to have hard conversations they may not be able to have within their own organizations, but also the ability to connect with new people. The broadening of your network is so important for where you are in your career and where you want your career to go. And so I think that professional organizations are a fantastic way to create a network. And I personally, I also think that for me, my professional organization, the ability for me to network with my colleagues in the same space, OBAP, I think Dana touched on, PAPA, Latino Pilots Association, National Gay Pilots Association, we are all trying to affect change in this industry. And it is not an issue that one of us can work on alone. We all have to work together. And so that's where my network comes from now, is the other professional organizations. Just one little short story. Last week, we had an Afghan pilot. She spoke at our conference, and she fled Afghanistan, came to the United States, and she said, if only I had known about your organization when I arrived in the United States 8 years ago, my life would have been so much easier. And that's, to me, that's like the biggest positive comment I can receive, is that you can help me do what I want to do. And that's why we exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Offering that safe space, if you will, and those resources to kind of help you. Ebony, I know that AMAC has made a tremendous difference in my personal life and professionally. And I wanted to kind of hear from you of what you think the role of an organization, a professional organization, should be for the industry.
Sure. Associations are conveners, right? We bring people together to address issues, problems, opportunities. And as a convener, AMAC does just that, right? We educate, we advocate, we create opportunity to network and connect. And, you know, just as the previous person said, I think that's a critical role in what we do. And so I would encourage, you know, each of you who are out there listening to this to find organizations and associations that do just that. You know, look at the issues that are important to you or the opportunities out there that you want to have an impact, and you know, and participate and engage and get active, just as you're doing today. But it does take, for issues in particular DEI, right? It takes a collective effort to affect change. And so I welcome each of you as well to participate with AMAC. We are a diverse organization, not just, you know, not one thing, right? We're airport and airport officials, we're people who are in corporate America. We are folks who are disadvantaged and minority owned and women owned businesses. And so we're conveners of all of those people. Thank you, Kiva.
Absolutely. And this conversation, and actually, I think I may have spoken to one of you about the fact that it's just kind of like an aha moment for us, where, you know, the pilot world, that part of aviation has kind of set separate from the airport world and the other part of this aviation world. But why not collaborate where we can to educate each other on, you know, what our challenges are, and even some of the solutions that have helped us. So perhaps there's an opportunity to collaborate where we can and support one another as well. So that's something that even I am kind of having an epiphany on, you know, as I've had these conversations with all of you over the past couple of weeks. And I didn't know if anyone else wanted to offer any thoughts on what a professional organization has meant for them, or any benefits that you've been able to, you know, really seek and also experience because of your affiliation. Okay. Well, I guess what I would like to do is also talk a little bit about, you know, I think we may have some people in the audience who may be interested in hearing more about what it's like to speak up. You know, like we just kind of talked about having this environment of support. And, you know, with aviation, some parts of aviation being male dominated, you know, and even in the academic environment, we want to know, you know, what is your advice to help women overcome this challenge of speaking up and feeling like they're heard? And I'll start this one off with Allison.
Well, I think that you have a panel full of very strong women who have very strong opinions that they are not afraid to share. But, you know, early on in my career, that probably wasn't the case, although I do have a very extroverted personality, so I am not one to shy away from saying what's on my mind. But I say, you know, to young women who may be uncomfortable, start small. You know, share an opinion in a work meeting before you have to go on a platform that's much more controversial. Everybody's voice matters. You don't know how someone is going to take what you say unless you put it out there. Your thoughts have value, and your experience shapes your conversations. And the white male at the table has a very different experience than you may, and what you say has value. And so I would charge everybody to understand their worth, understand their value, and understand that they are at the table because they belong to be there.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Dana, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Sure, thank you. You know, at United 88 Academy, we are 3 months in to very, very brand new, and something that we want to is to speak up. So day one of orientation, we tell them that you deserve to be here, and that United saw something in each and every one of you that they can't wait to have you in their flight deck 5 years from now. So we're trying to instill in them to speak up, ask questions. There's no stupid question, but if you don't ask, you're not going to get the help that you need. With that, we have a very diverse staff to help with our students. So when we're in meetings, everything that we do, we focus on the student. The student comes first. So if I don't have my staff speaking up to support the students, I'm not going to be able to support the students in the best way that I can. So it's really making sure that, in our organization, everybody has a voice, everybody deserves to be there, and everybody deserves to speak up. I do think that does come with experience, though. 22 years ago, I wasn't that person to stand up for what I thought I needed. But it was through different relationships I had in the industry, different people to help me see that I deserve, a voice or a seat at the table. So it's really just instilling that in every one of my students, employees, so they don't have to go through maybe what I had to go through.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we have about 5 minutes left before I turn things over to our chapter president, Melinda. So I guess what I'll do is I'll go around and ask you all if you have any parting thoughts or advice that you would like for the audience to walk away with, with regard to women in this industry or supporting women in this industry, because like any other cause or objective, allies are just as important and just as helpful. So I'll go around and I'll start with, I'll start with you, Ebony.
So, echoing what some of the other women said, ensure women have the opportunity to speak, right? Give women opportunities for advancement and projects, give them the opportunity to prove themselves, ensure they're a part of key decisions. You have the opportunity to do that. And I would say, we haven't talked about this, and this could be a topic alone, but give women equal pay. So pay women fairly. So that would be my advice to support women in this industry. Let them speak, give them opportunity to prove themselves, give them equal pay.
That's right. Thank you for saying that. All right, I'll hand it off to Gladys.
For everyone, really, I think the potential in each of our team members, and especially we focus a lot to really help the women in our community and inside of our company. But the biggest thing too is they are very well studied. We're very well studied. We're ready to deliver. But the biggest thing is it is about opportunity, but also how we help each other inside of that advancement portion of it. I think that a lot of the times you have team members, women that come to you and they're facing a challenge, and it's tough, especially for some of the senior managers that are men, to try to tackle that on, because they don't know how that feels to be spoken to that way, or not to be acknowledged, or even though she may have been the subject matter expert and she's, I almost was going to say kick something, but she's really, really on top of her game. The other peers don't respect her. Other people that you can probably say, you know what, let me introduce you. I've got Allison, and it's funny, she has a very similar story, and maybe you guys can just have a quick conversation offline. And that happened with me inside of our region. TJ out of Sacramento in California went and referred one of his engineers who was advancing and looking at advancement inside of their airport, and said, hey, can you guys just have a quick conversation? And we did. We ended up having lunch together over a Zoom call, and she went over a lot of the things that she had experienced, and really want to know, did you experience that, and how did you get through it? Now, having no affiliation with her airport was really nice. I didn't have to feed back to TJ and who's her boss and say, hey, this is what kind of went on. Did you look at your team in this way? Do you know this is going on? What I ended up doing is, over time, I just kind of say, hey, how's things going? And then he may say, well, I've got some questions. Maybe you can help me and give me some insight so that he can create a better culture and environment to help all of their potential of the team members grow. But he was really concerned about that female employee. And again, it's okay to have that conversation. I think for all of us here, we do have to have the uncomfortable conversation, and we do have to recognize that there are some things that are not equitable. There are some things that are discriminatory. There are things that are derogatory. There's things that are said about people's preference or their background, or even the way they look. And all we can do is deal with it. And we can talk about it, work through that, and hopefully make sure that we create that positive change into the future. And that's kind of what Ebony and Allison and Dana and myself challenge everybody to is to have that uncomfortable conversation and figure out what advocacy is necessary in order to make your work culture all inclusive, but also not to make it awkward. So that's another word that I always hope everybody understands. It can get real awkward real fast. And I've had it happen inside of different meetings of mine. And I have to acknowledge that. And then we start back at square one. So have some form of safe word so everybody can reset. But you got to make it so that people don't get turned off. And that also happens in the association. You guys probably have lots of people or different people, or even one person that gets turned off real quick and they just drop everything. They drop that organization, they drop showing up, they drop connecting with people. And if you see that too, figure out how you can get them back into understanding, because I also don't think we want an environment that pushes people away. So that's kind of my spill in that be kind portion of it and understanding.
Thank you so much, Gladys. Such important words. Allison, I wanted to know if you had any parting thoughts.
I guess just quickly that, you know, we have a seat at the table. We have important experiences and information to share. We're not going anywhere. You know, the workforce needs us, and so we all need to work together to create an environment that facilitates our retention and our growth.
Absolutely, thank you. And Dana.
Yeah, so when I left the flight deck, I had all of the pilots that reported to me reach out to me and tell me that I was crazy for getting out of the flight deck and moving over to education. And I would just say for, you know, the females who are either trying to decide how to transition or how to grow, like challenging situations do help you grow, learning new roles, taking on different opportunities, but then also female leaders giving your females different opportunities for them to grow into different positions or different levels. I think that's so important. You know, our students or students I've talked to think that this is, you know, their career and they have to stay in this career for the next, you know, 40 years. And it's like, there's so many opportunities in aviation that I feel like you can navigate in this career in so many different ways, but not to be afraid of taking on challenging positions or being uncomfortable at the table, like knowing that you do have a voice, but also knowing that you can grow from that experience.
That's wonderful. And so with that, I just want to thank all of our speakers for sharing their amazing stories. And I hope that we all learned something that we can carry on our path. I know I have. Lastly, I want to remind everyone that nominations are open for the Northeast Chapter's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award, and those nominations will close on May 2nd. And with that, I will turn it back over to our chapter president, Melinda Montgomery, for closing remarks.
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much, Kiva. I'd like to just say that was a fantastic discussion. In closing, aviation women should not have to balance life and work on a wing and a prayer. I feel like that's what we all do. We need to move the needle on support for everyone in the workplace. We need to make it easier for the next workforce that comes behind us. And we have a responsibility to make diversity work in the workplace. I'd like to thank our speakers. I'd like to thank Kiva and Api. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.